Okay, let's now start to the fireside chat, but before I do that, I would like to ask Mathias to say some words, and then we're going to start for the fireside. Thank you very much, Mathias.
Thank you very much. So as a crypto winter, I know more crypto winter as crypto summers. So I started 2013 with this case, and I'm now very relaxed because the main business between the business reputation business is infrastructure. We test street lighting columns from Iceland to Israel for communities and something like this. So this is a reputable business. And the other case is that I built up in the Bitcoin only area companies. So I'm invested in Coinfinity, which is a Bitcoin broker, the oldest German-speaking Bitcoin broker. And the business is in the right way. So when the Bitcoin price goes down, the turnover of the broker goes up, and so it's a very good relationship when you trust something like Bitcoin, and also you can generate a cash flow. So I'm very relaxed in this case, and I also have other activities. For example, shares on BTC Echo, which is more crypto orientated as Bitcoin orientated, and but I'm more focused on Bitcoin only because it's more security for me. But I start to invest in the end of 2006. 26 this year to invest more in the area of AI and robotics and blockchain and so on, and in the crypto area. Because I'm very relaxed because of the Bitcoin case, and so I have now the capacity to do other things. And I think the point that AI coming into this area is a very good idea in my opinion, and I have really fun. I think when I can hear Pius Sprenger, because he moves billions of dollars, and also he has a big heart for the German Mittelstand, and so I think it's very interesting to hear something about his view of Bitcoin and the other cases. And every time when I hear something from him, it's very interesting. I think in Switzerland, not so much people know him. In Germany, more and more people know him, and he has a lot of fans there in the German-spoken area. And so I wish you all the best for this crypto mountain, and we support activities which are open-minded, and this is very important, especially in this area of crypto and so on. Not Bitcoin against crypto, against robotics, or however. So be open-minded, and this is my view. And so Crypto Mountain also in the future will grow, and we will support you also in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mathias. I would like to ask to take your seat for the fireside. Hey.
You smell that? What is that?
What?
What's that smell?
A cologne?
No.
Opportunity.
No. Money.
Oh, okay.
I smell money.
Okay.
Chris. God damn it.
Sorry.
This is your basic mortgage bond. All right? The originals were simple. They were just thousands of AAA mortgages bundled together, guaranteed by the US government. The modern ones are different. They're private, and they're made up of layers of tranches. The highest level AAAs getting paid first, the lowest rated Bs getting paid last, taking on defaults first. Now, obviously, if you're buying Bs, you can make more money, but they're a little risky. Sometimes they fail. Chris? Somewhere along the line, these Bs and double Bs went from a little risky to dog shit, Where's the trash?
Behind you.
I'm talking rock bottom FICO scores. No income verification. Adjustable rates, dog shit. The default rates are already up from 1% to 4%, fellas. And if they rise to 8%, and they will, a lot of these triple Bs are going to 0 too. And that, you're too close, is an opportunity.
Okay, you're saying that at 8% the bonds fail and we are already at 4%?
That's right.
If they go to 8, it's Armageddon.
Yeah, that's right.
How come nobody's talking about this?
You're completely sure of the math.
Look at him. That's my quant.
You're what?
My quantitative. My math specialist. Look at him. You notice anything different about him? Look at his face.
That's pretty racist.
Look at his eyes. I'll give you a hint. His name's Yang. He won a national math competition in China. He doesn't even speak English. Yeah, I'm sure of the math. Actually, my name's Jiang, and I do speak English. Jared likes to say I don't because he thinks it makes me seem more authentic. And I got second in that national math competition.
So you're offering us a chance to short this pile of blocks? How?
With something called a credit default swap. It's like insurance on the bond, and if it goes bust, you can make 10 to 1, even 20 to 1 return, and it's already slowly going bust.
10 to 1, 20 to 1. No way.
And no one's paying attention. No one is paying attention because the banks are too busy getting paid obscene fees to sell these bonds.
But wait, you are the bank. When you work for the bank, I bet your margins are pretty nice and fat.
Let's not talk about my margins, by the way. Being nice and fat, that's a nice shirt. Do they make it for men?
Aren't you the bank?
I work for the bank. I don't think like a bank. Big bank, small bank, I like to make money. All right? Let me put it this way. I'm standing in front of a burning house, and I'm offering you fire insurance on it.
How can these underlying bonds be as bad as you say? It wouldn't be legal.
Nobody knows what's in them. Nobody knows what's in the bonds. I've seen some that are 65% AAA rated, that I know for a fact are filled with 95% subprime shit with FICOs below 550.
Get the fuck out of here.
You want me to really blow your mind? When the market deems a bond too risky to buy, what do you think we do with it? Take a guess.
I don't know, you tell me.
All right. You think we just warehouse it on the books? No. We just repackage it with a bunch of other shit that didn't sell and put it into a CDO.
A CDO.
Yes, a CDO.
What is that?
This is where we take a bunch of Bs, double Bs, and triple Bs that haven't sold, and we put them in a pile. And when the pile gets large enough, the whole thing is suddenly considered diversified. And then the whores at the rating agency give it a 92, 93% AAA rating. No questions asked.
Say that again.
A collateralized debt obligation. It's important to understand because it's what allowed a housing crisis to become a nationwide economic disaster. Here's world-famous chef Anthony Bourdain to explain.
Okay, I'm a chef on a Sunday afternoon, setting the menu at a big restaurant. I ordered my fish on Friday, which is the mortgage bond that Michael Burry shorted. But some of the fresh fish doesn't sell. I don't know why, maybe it just came out halibut has the intelligence of a dolphin. So what am I gonna do? Throw all this unsold fish, which is the triple B level of the bond, in the garbage and take the loss? No way. Being the crafty and morally onerous chef that I am, whatever crappy levels of the bond I don't sell, I throw into a seafood stew. See, it's not old fish, it's a whole new thing. And the best part is they're eating 3-day-old halibut. That is a CDO.
Well, I just need to know how these could possibly be collated.
Somehow you're like the Dora the Explorer, and you're the first person. Nobody is listening to you. Nobody is listening to you. That's quite tough, especially when you are in trading and banking, etc. And my question to you, Pius, is what is real, what is Hollywood?
Well, first of all, Hollywood was quite good to show what happened, but actually, as a matter of fact, was only half as much fun and emotion than real life. By the way, the quant is Chinese. His name is Eugene, and he was, I think, number 3. But he's a pretty smart guy. Just maybe to give a background story, I joined Deutsche Bank in 2004-05, and Craig Lehmann, who actually is played by Ryan Gosling, was my direct boss. So he was he was the guy who showed subprime. It was not like that the Michael Burrys of the world or all this hedge fund came up with the idea. It was like Craig Lehmann who said, well, this all the same shit, it's gonna go down to zero. And my job was, I joined from Morgan Stanley, and I was a derivatives trader, but in totally unrelated areas. I did corporate derivatives. And my job was actually to create the derivatives market, the CDS, credit default swaps, on portfolio trades. So pretty much shorting, sort of like an asset class which was not easy to short, using sort of like sophisticated instruments, in this case, credit default swaps. But back then, it was very, very tough because in order to make this market going, everybody wanted to buy, but nobody wanted to sell. Everybody believed it's going to be great, there will be no default, so everybody wants to buy the risk. Nobody wants to sell. Here they call it short the risk. So we decided at some point, screw it, we just short it ourselves. We're doing it, we're building up the book, so my job was somehow trade it in the right way, that we are not being blown out of the water. So we started shorting in 04-05. We went to all the conferences with a 100-page pitch book saying that subprime bonds are a piece of shit. But we traded both sides. I go long, I short, but like that was our trade opinion. People made fun of me, and that's where the lonely part came in. So what is it what we could see, what maybe the other guys didn't see? We sort of like applied common sense, and my advantage was, I came, as I said, from a totally different field. I came from totally different markets, different bank, trade. I was based back then in London, in Europe, and then I moved at some point to the US. And what is interesting was, because I was not sort of like framed by the old wisdom, these are like sort of like a mortgage trust, they're never going to default, everything is fine. Housing always goes one way, and they're secured by houses. So Craig, who actually in real life looks like Ryan Gosling, now is older, we always meet up and eat actually sushi. So he's a fun guy, totally extreme, and he's insane. And actually his quotes are even funnier than he. He has great quotes. I don't know how he makes that. Very charismatic guy. And looks really similar to Ryan Gosling. The interesting thing was that Craig is this Brooklyn guy. He went to college, but not was really the sophisticated guy. He's just like this street smart dude who like is good at reading people and seeing opportunities. And so he taught the market to me. He explained the structures. Like a subprime bond has like 600 pages of like tense paper. I never read them. There's no reason to read. I read like the first 10. That's good enough terms of terms. And I think what's interesting is like now you start shorting that, and everybody else is going long. Everybody wants to own the risk. So at some point, the management of the bank says, "Hey guys, what are you doing? What's wrong with this like Brooklyn dude crying, Craig who's crazy?" And then there's like his derivatives guy became his number 2, like with this German who's like this Arnold Schwarzenegger accent. On the other side, we have the smartest trader from Goldman Sachs. We have all these highly educated Yale, Stanford, Harvard people. We have the rating agencies, but being like Moody's has been around in the business since I think the 1920s. So what it is what you people think you know, what these guys with very complicated models figured out before you arrived. And I think it was common sense. So we just put on the trade. We had Eugene, who's a very smart guy, always running the numbers, and like, well, that's gonna look bad. And my job was just to put on more shorts using derivatives and doing it in the most cost-efficient way. But literally from 2004-05 until 2006-07, it's a very lonely walk because people make fun of you. I remember I gave presentation in Las Vegas, and you walk in before me, the guy who sells mortgages. The room is full. I walk in and do the Craig Lehmann pitch. saying, well, you should maybe short that, and the room is empty, and like two guys, and they're like from Deutsche Bank. So that's a situation. You feel very lonely, and you question yourself constantly. Say, well, maybe I'm the idiot, and I'm at some point I'm going to lose a job, and it was actually a real situation where people said, like, and I remember the day where I was asked in the office of the head who ran credit trading of Deutsche Bank globally, and this gentleman called Roch Misra said, Pius, come, and if you do not cover half of your shorts, which means if I don't really reduce my position, I'm going to fire you tomorrow. So you better do it today, which is hard to do, but somehow we got that. So it was this constant pressure. And then 2007 happened, and well, it was interesting. The market collapsed, and it happened actually the way we foresaw it, and it was our best year. It was personally my best year ever. When everything collapsed, was our best year ever. So you feel great, but then maybe it's important as well. If you're right, you feel very great, and you think, oh, we are the genius. But at some point, you don't feel that great, because then you realize, well, if really that can infect the overall market, it feels like you're in an airplane with everybody on it in 35,000 feet, and it's just everybody gonna die. So it doesn't even matter where it right. So I think it was a very lonely walk, but ultimately we were right, and well, that was the outcome.
But Pius, we had a time. Normally trading is very quick, but I believe you had really. A phase where you have an idea, and then this idea evolves, and then you talk to people, and then you say, yes, we see this, It's and this takes some time, and during this process, you have to defend, you have to stay your line. And how did you organize? And what kind of people were supporting you, and what kind of people you said, no, just useless, don't talk to them? That would be... Well, the boss, of course, is maybe not on your side.
Pretty much never talk to... that's a good point you make, Reto. Always avoid senior management. That's going to be it's a debacle. So if one group in a bank doesn't know how a bank operates, it's the executive committee of a bank. And that's a general rule. And I really say that because I've seen it. It's even more true today. In the old days, by the way, there were still experts. Nowadays, they're pure, I would say, compliance officers. Never really did the trade in their life, never understood any risk, and therefore the system actually becomes risky. We're going to talk about that a bit later. So the totally clueless people. So my job was always to stay under the radar screen, and just to go about my business as good as possible. But yes, I had a luxury. I was still young, no kids, no wife. So well, what's the worst thing can happen to me? I'm gonna get fired, which was so close anyway a couple of times. So I didn't really have any fear. But yes, I think you have to be, one thing you learn as well. There's no point to waste your resources and energy to try to convince people of the idea if they don't like it. That's no point. It's a waste of energy. Having said that, it's always important during that time not to think that you're the genius. Always question yourself, am I right? Or maybe I'm wrong. And listen to why they are thinking the way they are thinking, but not starting too much of arguing. I like to argue a lot. But that was pointless. So I think it just, we looked at it, it made tons of sense. But of course, there's like these moments where I remember that. One day, a guy who worked for me calls me up, so he met this Morgan Stanley prop traders, and he showed them the model, and this was like, it's like almost like, must have been like, felt like quantum computing today for him back then. And like, oh, they modeled everything, so, and look, and they're long, and they're so great, and they know everything. Back then, story told short, this guy lost 3 billion against us. 3 billion on one trade. So apparently they were not that smart after all, and the model was not that great after all. But I think it's just like a follow instinct, but always question yourself, and to see signals well. But here we were always certain because things just did exactly the way we expected to develop, and default rates went up, housing collapsed ultimately, and we were on the right side.
I just want to let the audience know that we do have, at the end of the Fireside chat, for some Q&As. So if you already have questions, just keep them in the back of your mind. We do have a microphone that we will put in the audience a little bit later. We just talked about your past, and you realized during the crash, I think, that the management has actually no idea what they're doing. I assume you were suspicious already some years before that, but in 2008 you really saw, wow, nobody comes to save me. They actually have no clue. And I think to know that story, it's very important because it's the base, I think, for your statement that you're pretty popular of, because you say nowadays Bitcoin will go over 10 millions. So it's very important that we start with the base of your story, because I have the feeling that the seed of this statement lays there. I wonder if we go back to 2008, I assume that was also a very emotional moment when you realized, yes, we won, but wait, we are all sitting in the same plane that will crash down. Then it took several years before you read the white paper the first time. I think you read it the first time in around 2013, 14, around that. Can you explain to me how these around 4 or 5 years have been for you mentally? Was reading the white paper kind of like an anchor, kind of like a salvation to read something where you suddenly saw a possibility that is independent from a management?
Yeah, sort of. Like, I think it's Désirée, a point is interesting about 2008. During the crisis already, I've seen one thing. If you work in an organization like a big bank, like Wall Street, you assume that I was a regular trader, so like a senior trader, a head trader at some point, but like I was not part of like these guys who got paid, and they happen like 20, 30 million a year. So you think if somebody's being paid 20, 30 million a year, he better knows what's going on, because you trust them, because the authority comes via the rank, and on Wall Street, where how much money is being paid. So he must know one or two things. So my belief was, when the crisis hit, these guys, they're going to pick up the phone in the corner office and things going to be sorted out. What did I see? Whenever I walked on the trading floor, I could see, and Andrew Chain was one of them, he passed away, unfortunately, who I really respected a lot. I could see this senior management being paid all the money, locked up in the corner offices, staring at Bloomberg, and watching stock price going down of banks. Totally shell-shocked. No guidance. We were literally like left alone out there, which I think I must have violated with crack every rule out there. Nowadays, with all the regulation, we would have gotten fired like 10,000, 100 times over. So that is the feeling, like you trust sort of like a system, an elite, people you believe they have reputation, they have the wisdom to step in when you need them, and you realize there's nothing. There's literally nothing. That was the first moment for me where I was like shocked, and I spoke about that at length with my back then wife, and said, listen, that's a big issue, and so it troubled me a lot. But I always had an instinct something is wrong. But then, interesting enough, pivot was in 2008-9. I had this I followed what was the bailout programs, the TAR programs in the US mainly, and I rescued the banks. And I thought my gut feel was, this is wrong. It feels totally wrong. We as bankers, sorry for my French, and we have I should say, fucked it up so badly. Not necessarily we, it was Bill Clinton. We took advantage of a system and it got too big and ultimately we screwed it up. And then I realized what happened next is we screwed it up. Government bailed us out. Switzerland, UBS had a 40 billion bailout. I think there's just a bank around the corner here. Nothing wrong with that. I'm a customer of them. So I talked to management and said, that doesn't make any sense. I think we just should go bust. It didn't really matter to me. I was young enough. I needed the money, so I got to do something else. But instead, I realized they worked together and actually saved the guys, reduced the rates. So all the guys with assets became richer. And the guys who saved, who really says, okay, I want to save here, I want to do the right thing, they got totally screwed. The old people, the money, the people don't really have usually, the regular workers who don't really have too much money left to invest. So that's the first time I was like, that's a strange system. And then the next thing was like, I was taking over Greg Lippmann's trading desk, so he left and formed his own hedge fund, so I took over his seat in New York and ran the mortgage trading desk of Deutsche Bank. And then I was asked as well, that was the next thing, to run the bad bank of Deutsche Bank, to run the whole thing, pretty much all the shit, sorry for my French, but that's like what it was, which we put on the balance sheet. So it was like 140 billion of crap, which we had on balance sheet. So we had casinos, we had banks, we had assets, we had brothels, you won't believe that. I don't know how we ended up with all that. So I realized, well, that's an interesting system. So a bank uses actually saving money, gets involved in all these wonderful things. Traders pretend they are making all the money, using actually bank's balance sheet. All the hedge funds have a wonderful business model running, the 220, and if that goes wrong, they put the gates up and they're even being bailed out. So I felt like, no, I didn't mind to receive the check, to be very honest. So I'm not the guy like, if someone pays me, I take it. So like that's, I'm not more Catholic, despite my name, than the Pope. But in 2012 was the first time I met a gentleman who said, like, very young guy, and that was my first experience, listen to young people. The guy was like early 20s, and he said, well, he's a semi-professional poker player, but there's this Bitcoin, because when you're online poker, it's not that easy, and there's this Bitcoin thing going on, like, oh, what's that? So I started reading in 2013, 14, still busy in the bank, the Bitcoin white paper. And I was first, I think, fascinated by the idea of encryption, pretty much to have encryption moving value across in a decentralized way, peer-to-peer across a distributed, decentralized network. I was highly intrigued by that. I did math in my old days, so that was like, resonated with me. What really then brought me the bit, so I liked that very much. I could see here finally you have a system where you actually take your own control of the value, and there is no bank, there is no compliance officer, nobody who gonna talk to you. But that was not then the immediate way. So I got then involved in Bitcoin in a more convoluted way based on my trading background.
I mean, Bitcoin and the crash or the collapse is highly interconnected. During what time did you realize the encode of the first Genesis block? Because in the first Genesis block mined, there is encoded the times, 3rd of January 2009, canceller on break of second bailout for banks.
Yeah.
What happened to you when you realized that?
Well, that quote didn't really resonate too much with me, but I think what resonated more was time. It was January 3rd, 2009. And I think the white paper was October 31st, 2008. So we were still in the middle of the global financial crisis. And the stock market hit, I think, the low in, beginning of March 2009. So pretty much I found that more amazing after all to say, why on earth happens in the middle of the great financial crisis where suddenly it looks like a financial system as we seem to know very well is actually doesn't look that robust after all, looks very fragile. Something like that drops to the planet, like Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows until today who is this guy. And I found that very, very interesting. I think the moment was very important. I think, and I always say that, if Wall Street and the governments didn't act the way they did by bailing out all the banks and funds, we wouldn't be sitting here today to talk about Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin reflects somehow the gut feel that there's something wrong and could go terribly wrong, and that could be an alternative. So I think that's something I could sense then back then when Bitcoin was like in the hundreds. It was not that relevant. I was fascinated by the volatility, but what intrigued me more was like the timing was like strange. It's sort of like coincided.
We will go into that a little bit later, where you really can show us how you come to the conclusion of the 10 millions, but I think Reto has prepared something. I heard that since the beginning, like already in your childhood, you always had the tendency to ask, is that even true? Is that true? Is this quote, is this fact, is this truth that we are living, is there a mistake? You were really wondering. So I assume that also in your relationship with Bitcoin, we can say you always tried to find mistakes and you found a lot of answers. So maybe, Reto, this is the perfect base for something that you have figured out and that we have already seen maybe a little bit in the first snippet. Yeah, there is something coming up. It's not an award. It looks like one.
I want to say
bit.
that
It's not.
You're a great trader if you're 51% of the time right. 51, that makes you a great trader.
But there is something that you may recognize. So, Reto, what is it? Maybe with the microphone, yeah.
Now we reverse a little bit the role. What you have done in the film, do we now with you, with Bitcoin?
Oh.
That's
okay.
So it's
That doesn't represent the Bitcoin system, by the way.
Also, I have here quantum, I have energy, I have the topic repression, I have the topic alternative. What do you want to start first?
Let's start with
Also maybe
quantum.
energy, the easy one, energy.
Quantum. I just had a very long chat with, and I think tomorrow going to be very exciting to listen to Wasim. So I thankfully you rescued me on that question because I'm not a quantum expert here. We can start about quantum.
Quantum.
Yeah.
I think Reto has the idea that there are some words, some terms that you probably as a Bitcoiner hear pretty often and say, yeah, that's nice what you're doing, but there is no future because quantum, because energy, because alternatives. So we wonder, what are your questions? Maybe also that's a very great takeaway for the audience when we will go out and people tell us.
I think that's maybe the more obvious and very extreme question, which is always there, is like energy. Energy is, to give you a rough idea about Bitcoin, I think the Bitcoin network is roughly powered by an energy equivalent of like 17 to 20 average power plants, nuclear power plants, roughly. But I think Yasim can tell you tomorrow, I think quantum computing, that's pretty, and by the way, AI takes a lot of energy as well. So I think just OpenAI needs 2 nuclear plants. So but it's energy intensive. Now we are living in a world where people talk about sustainability, where people talk about, well, that's a waste of energy. I think actually it's the strength of Bitcoin because it's sort of like stored energy. So when you actually do the proof of work, it's like where you run the mathematical quiz. And it's always sort of like gets harder, and most of you guys might know that in order to keep sort of like the 10-minute clock running. And that part, I think, is very, very essential. And it's the first time where you actually have money, where real energy is put in. So if you ask you, what do you prefer more? You prefer here's a money printer, which is just as costs you hardly anything, but just can print billions and billions of dollars, or Swiss franc, but Switzerland is more conservative, or euros, or you have something which really takes proper energy. That's point one. Point two is, think about the great idea. As well, you can actually create energy in a location like warm areas or like the desert. And now you use actually that energy, which you cannot really use over there. And it's very costly to transport over the ocean, over the planet, and you really mine it. Now you create value. You mine it, you create Bitcoin. And now did Bitcoin via a simple network, actually you can distribute wherever the capital is being needed. That is a so effective way actually to distribute energy, which didn't exist before. And therefore I think when people say, oh, it's energy intensive, it's great. It's great, and it's actually is a key characteristic, and it's very powerful.
Next word. Which next word would you like to choose?
Alternatives.
Alternatives? Do you, like when someone says, yeah, it's great until something better comes up? What's your answer on that?
There's nothing which, I don't want to sound as Michael Saylor. I don't have 780,000 Bitcoins, unfortunately, yet. Who knows? No, just kidding. Of course, you can argue there are also alternatives coming along, but that's the dream of all like this alternative token you have, all these altcoins you have. And I'm not poo-poo these things at all. Like I embrace any form of innovation. But having said that, the idea that Bitcoin started in the midst of the crisis, that nobody knows who this guy was who did it, Satoshi Nakamoto, and there's no issuer, there's no CEO, there's just pure network. That actually is, what I would say differently, what was the best idea we had at the end of the 20th century? I think it was the internet, distribution of information, highly decentralized network, no CEO, no management, and it just came to life. What's Bitcoin? It's decentralized network of distributing value. No CEO, no management, no policies. Like you have of course, you have like the algorithm. So I think that's hard to replicate. And now people say, what's about Ethereum? What's about these smart contracts? Well, Ethereum, yes, might be interesting, but on the other hand, it's run by management. It's an incorporated company, actually here not far away, Zug, Switzerland. It's controlled by a...
Was it foundation? Foundation.
Foundation, yeah, but like, you know what I mean, like a bunch of guys and you know who they are. So I think that's a big difference, and that's true for all the other features. So I think, and then outside of Bitcoin, I would say if I'm living in the year 1990s, and I would have the chance to buy a piece of the internet, which was not really able, I can only do it via proxies later on with Google and Facebook. Well, that's what Bitcoin is today.
I see, I mean, when you go out with these 10 million, I mean, that's what you say. You then create some boss in a way, like if I say, okay, I have something, you make 20% every year, and everybody says, it's just not possible. I do not trust this guy, because everybody knows everything that is more than 7 or 10%, that's already very good. Everybody's satisfied, kind of. How do you deal with that? Because it's kind of, as we know, looking back, the performance was incredible. Of course, you need to have the right time points for that, of course. But how do you deal with that?
With the fact that the return looks so bad compared to, well, first of all, 20% is doable. Just yesterday, an era ended with Warren Buffett. The first investor letter was written by Craig Abel from Berkshire Hathaway. And indeed, actually, Warren Buffett delivered 19.9% annualized return since 1964. So, but he's a genius, he's an investor genius, and maybe had some good knowledge as well. But apart from that, absolutely, it's very hard to to argue that that it looks excessive. But having said that, I think you won't, very clear as well. I don't think, let's take a step back. For me, Bitcoin, the strongest argument for Bitcoin is the network, the decentralized network. So I'm not going to make now a political activist statement here, and like even I think you could figure that out. I have some libertarian streaks somehow, but it's the decentralized network, and a lot of research went into actually to study the topology of networks, and that's where my math background comes back to life. I find it quite intriguing that now you can actually apply in science to actually a network. You can study the features, you can ask questions, you can say, this is my thesis. If it's a decentralized network, then certain characteristics should be there, like power law, we talk in a second. And I find it very interesting. So as a matter of fact, because of the network effect, we started like a non-profit organization under the leadership of Giovanni Santostasi. Is an Italian-American astrophysicist, and I'm proud to say I'm a founding member. It's called the Scientific Bitcoin Institute. It just started like 1.5 months ago. So where actually the purpose is like to study Bitcoin with a scientific lens in terms of like what's the network, and then as well to have the sort of like scientific rigorous to say, at what point are we wrong? At what point is what we think is happening not happening? That is important as well. No, I don't want to become too complicated, but Karl Popper talks about falsification of science is about you're able to falsify a statement, and that's what we are trying to do. But I think my strongest argument is a decentralized network, because if you have decentralized networks, that's very, very powerful. What I learned during the great financial crisis, if it's one group thing, there's one risk, and everybody was set up in exactly the same way. How does the financial system look today? Even worse. Why? Because regulation got tougher. You have more clueless management, and on that I'm very clear, and I would even put it in writing and in front of CEOs of banks. And I'm pretty certain if a crisis were to hit, it would even be more systemic and much more severe than what we happened in 2008. Because everybody is faced in the same way, same capital constraints, everybody puts on the same trades at the end of the day. The same what happened in 2008. So therefore, I think Bitcoin is for me, the network character is a great alternative to everything else. And the growth going to be not as great as we've seen in the past.
Maybe that leads us to the fourth word. You just said that it also works in crisis. When I think about Iran and the currency in Iran, it just collapsed completely. It's 0 francs. Bitcoin is censor resistant, which, because it's so independent, because it differs from other assets. As soon as you have someone you have to rely on, it's tricky. Is Bitcoin, can it be prohibited? And question to that, maybe you can go to a direction, can it be a solution for people in countries like Iran or similar?
The first question, Désirée, I don't think so. In order to prohibit it, it would assume that all the countries in the world would actually say we switch off the network for Bitcoin. It's not allowed to run it. Like, to give you an idea, just even on the mining, I think China tried to do exactly that. Didn't really work that well either. It dipped, it came back. And that Bitcoin, I think it's very important. And here's Alex, I know what he likes most, what I say. Bitcoin is just a very resilient beast. It always comes back. That's the difference to all the others, by the way, financial assets I've seen. It goes up by 300-400%, it drops 90%. In order to go up then by 10 times, drop another 70%. I never seen that in any other financial assets. So it's quite impressive. So in terms of like countries trying to stop it, ban it, I think it has been tried, unlikely, and secondly as well, it's a 1.3 trillion market. Right now it's at 67,000 dollar per coin. It's around 1.3 billion of like market cap. It's not really that relevant for countries to be challenged by, but I think it's important, and that's important. A very good friend of mine, which I don't know how that happened, but when I was at Wallstreet at Deutsche Bank, we always have like this on-site federal guys, like from the Fed, from the Federal Reserve Bank. And so he had to check my trading area. And somehow we became friends, and we still meet once in a while. He's a great guy, Sunil. And once I asked him about Bitcoin, and he sort of like knew that I liked that. And he said, listen, Pius, I think Bitcoin is a piece of shit, which if it were up to us, we would stop it. We would ban it. But unfortunately, the Fed looked into that, and I figured out it's too late. Nothing they can do. It's no point even to try it. And it was like 3-4 years ago. So I think we passed that moment by now. In terms of like what happens to people in these countries, I think, and you don't even have to go to these people in these countries, even when you go to a local banks, and I don't know whether it happened to you. It happened to, for example, my sister. I wire money to her, bit of money. She goes there, she wants to take it out. The banker asks, who is this guy, Pius Sprenger? Well, he's a different name than my sister. She was married, like, different name. Well, that's my brother. So where does he get the money from? And why do you need that money in cash? You get all these questions. So that's the moment where you realize the money you think you have on the ledger of a bank is not your money. You don't own it. Actually, that was the moment my sister started buying Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is so different. You're like, that's the whole wonderful thing. You have like your 24th seat. You can walk across borders, and what are people going to do? I think it really gives you freedom. And when you know, for example, in Iran right now, and you just realize that your own currency got totally evaporated in a matter of like a couple of hours, and now you're sitting on a decentralized network, which has wealth, which is shared globally with so many people globally. I think it's just a beautiful thing for people, which gives them hope. And I think another point as well, one of the richest people, like quite a few billionaires, Bitcoin billionaires, actually came out of countries like Argentina. Why? Because when you're in Argentina in 20, even today, it was 10, 12, 15 years ago, like you couldn't keep up with the inflation. It was a joke anyway. So therefore, Bitcoin was for them actually the way to store their value, their life. And no, I wouldn't have expected it can turn into billions, but it did. So I think that's another example. When you live, therefore I think these guys had an advantage over us because we think we're in a safe system, and they already went to a not the great system. So I think it's more than just a bit of like it gives actually it's more than just a bit of hope. It's massive hope. It's a great alternative.
So you mean that the price of Bitcoin is very much also a reflection of the alternatives to Bitcoin, meaning especially when you look at Argentina, who had a phase of inflation, business was not able to do business with US, etc. Sometimes Bitcoin was the only way to do business because otherwise it was not possible. So that means that external factors have a very strong influence on the price of Bitcoin. It's quite difficult for me now how can you conclude that in 25 years it's at 10 million? That's because then you know exactly what's going on. So that's a little bit my problem I have.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can share a little bit more about the power law with us, because I once heard you say that there is systems that are exponential are always unstable and will collapse at some point, and on the other side is decentralization, which stands for the power law, which gives you a lot of security. So can you share a little bit more about the maths you did behind that, who gives you really, which is facts, science?
Absolutely. So first of all, these are my numbers. There's no financial advice, so I still have my compliance officer from the bank at the back. It's very important. There's no financial advice. And it's interesting as well. We started off the fire chat by saying I don't trust models, and I was betting against this, and I think worked out well. And now here sits the same guy saying, "Well, I have a model." So it's like that's a contradiction, but it's not. As I said, Bitcoin is, as I said earlier, a decentralized network, so you can actually study it from the lens of like network science. And the way it's being set up, the characteristic it has, is it follows strictly follows mathematical equations. If because of the features you would expect a power law. So what is that? And tomorrow I'm gonna show graphs. So when you look at the chart of a Bitcoin, then you will see that it looks very erratic. It goes up a lot, it drops a lot, goes up even more. It always reaches new high. But it looks very erratic. You wouldn't see any regularity. Now, it's interesting in science. It's sort of like important as well what lens you use in order to see a pattern. So it looks very erratic, but then let's do the following. When you really assume the log 10, or you can do any log for the price, and the log for the time. And the starting date is the date of the Genesis block, 3rd of January 2009. Suddenly, it looks more like a straight line. It swings around that. It swings around that. And it's interesting, that straight line worked over 8 order of magnitude. Huge. Now, where do you see that? Actually, it was a Swiss guy who first time found the power law, or made it popular, who was actually, just forgotten the name, Max. It will come to me. So what he did, he looked at the energy usage of animals, including people, us humans. So we have roughly, in order to survive, we use 2,000 calories a day. So what he did, he looked at the weight of an animal on the x-axis, and then looked at the energy consumption on the y-axis. Now, when you do that, then you see the ant, bacteria, the ant, the cat, the mouse, the cat, the dog, the humans, the horse, and then the bear, and then the blue whale. Now, what you see, everybody else is like stuck into the like lower end, in the left down corner, and the blue whale is up there. That's how it looks like. The guy's huge. But what the guy found out was the following. He said, let's apply log, like take the logarithm of 10, for example. And suddenly it's beautifully lined up in a straight line. And you find actually power law in sort of like, in a lot of various situations. You find that in biology, you find it in socioeconomic systems, and now actually you find it in, it looks like, Bitcoin, which is sort of like a mixture of like socioeconomic system, physics. There's a lot of things coming together here. And the beautiful thing is, Giovanni Santosanzi was the guy who figured that one out in 2018-19. He found it first. I've found it like 2 years ago on X when he posted about like that makes sense. So I went home and looked at my Excel sheet and tested that. It was so, reached out with him, he talked, and he constantly talks about that. And if you apply that law, then what you see is the following. You have two things going for you. You have one, the adoption rate. How does the adoption rate of the Bitcoin network look like? It goes with the power of 3, to the power of 3 in terms of adoption rate. And then with time. So it follows sort of like the similar adoption rate like the internet did in the 90s. It's very similar. The internet was, I think, slightly lower than 3. Bitcoin is close to 3. And on top of that, if a network is growing, So that's the adoption. You have more and more people coming in, it's becoming more valuable. The network becomes more valuable. So suddenly it's not just the 3 of us, now the 2 of you comes, we are 5, and it keeps going. Now suddenly there are all these connections. How does that grow? Well, it grows with the number of people to square. It's not exactly, it's n square, n times n minus 1 divided by 2, but that's n square roughly. So it doesn't really matter if it's big enough. So now you combine it. Something grows with the power of 3 over time, and then you add the power of 2, so you should expect it to grow with power in terms of time with 6. So keep it ever very simple. A direct conclusion of that is that whenever Bitcoin passes half of the time which already elapsed since the beginning of the Genesis block, the price goes up roughly by 10. So if you do that, then you can say, well, in 8.5 years, you should be, because it's 17 years, 8.5 years, it should be 10 times higher. And then in roughly 20 years, it should be 100 times higher, so you will get closer to 100. So I would say based on that, 1 million around 2034, and 10 million by around 2045. And if it were not to happen, I'm gonna change my name.
So, but to get from 1 million to 10 million, I assume that we need to get to a little bit larger bucket of money, which is institutional money, which is very close again to the Wall Street. How worried are you that they will fuck it up again?
They will, and therefore I'm actually here, and even I'm a former Wall Street guy, so I left many years ago, but I would say the following, that Wall Street, what did I do? And I will be now very candid, you might hate me for that, but yeah, it's like life is short. Did I help the system during the financial crisis? No. I was shorting the system. How did I short it? I created derivatives on the back of something. The whole subprime market, just to give you an idea, was around 1.5 trillion. It's little. The equity market right now is around 110, 120 billion. The real estate market, the biggest asset class, is 350 billion. So it's like it's nothing. But with the technology we got, and which I sort of like brought to Wall Street as well, we're able to create out of a little notional, 10, 20 times more. And not only that, you distribute it to everyone. So, and nobody knew anymore who was actually sitting on what risk. So it really built distrust. So that was the technology we did. I was part of that. Yeah, that's the fact. How is Wall Street gonna act? Are they nicer than I was? No, they're worse. Whenever they're like dogs. They smell weakness, and they go after that. And people say in Bitcoin world, Wall Street arrived in Bitcoin. It's the biggest nonsense. It's bollocks. Wall Street doesn't care a bit about Bitcoin. They don't want to understand for Bitcoin. For them, there's no difference between a soya bean future and Bitcoin. But if they see an opportunity, they will be in there. And if they see weakness, they will exploit it. And right now, I think Michael Saylor, all his ETFs, all like the bravado about like what we can do, created weakness. Because the market is still very small. 1.3 billion is very, very little. To give you an idea, gold is at 36 billion, I think. So it's very, very little. So it's very easy, and I was in illiquid markets, to manipulate markets if you want. So I'm not saying I did that. And I'm not saying I didn't. So I think it's very easy, I would say, to push the market down if you want and to bring it up if you want. But that's not a healthy one. But Bitcoin doesn't need, therefore, Wall Street, I think, to be successful. Bitcoin doesn't need a Michael Saylor at the end of the day. That's my strong belief. I think ultimately it's just another resilience test. And money will come in by pure long-only guy, because right now the money is being, if for example, a hedge fund is long Bitcoin, he's effectively short Bitcoin via other contracts, like derivatives contracts. So he plays the gamma play, he has delta hedging. So I think to be blunt, I think if you have real money, long-term money coming in, institutional money, that will be great enough. But even you don't need that much institutional money because most people are not going to sell their Bitcoins. So it's about the marginal impact. So if nobody wants to sell, it's suddenly going to go. It's going to rise its own. So liquidity is important, but I think the obsession with Wall Street, I consider actually as a bigger threat. And I don't think Bitcoin going to go to zero. But in my view, because actually it just occurred to me, Wall Street is potentially a bigger threat to Bitcoin than quantum computing.
So we have to write on there, Wall Street, not quantum, on this little block maybe. Maybe before we open up the Q&A, I have one last question to you, Pius. Like this rebellion against the system somehow, I still was able to read that out of one of your LinkedIn comments. Because some months ago, the CFO of Deutsche Bank shared a photo out of the so-called war room during a meeting with many posters in the background. A very proud photo. The comments were like, congrats, amazing, great, how to see teamwork, like the typical LinkedIn comments. But there was a comment by a Pius Sprenger. I quote, "Thank you very much for sharing confidential information. I just ran it through my AI and got quite fascinated results. I assume that you had the okay from the board to release war room information." So, Pius, I just wonder, is it kind of your responsibility to call out these systems nowadays?
Well, okay. First of all, the Wall Street Journal and the FT called me. They seriously called me after that one. So, Pius, is that right? Like, I didn't run an AI thing, but the guy is just an idiot. And by the way, he did something he was bragging and he shouldn't have done that. And by the way, he did something where usually, if I had been his boss, you're fired. You're not supposed to show from your war room a picture and put it on LinkedIn. It's the whole, clearly guy just want to brag war room, something that's obsession. No, am I rebellion? So I think even as a trader, even inside a bank, I had a tendency not to take the higher ups, especially after the great financial crisis, too seriously. But having said that, and that's something I try to instill to my kids, I'm not sure whether I'm successful, but it's something I do at least for myself, and I said early on in the fire chat, I always question myself, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Or could I be wrong here? And I think that's very healthy as well. And when I talk about Reto, the 10 million and 1 million, I will, of course, as well then see, is the power law doing what I expect it to do? Or and if that happens, that means that the topology of something in the system is changing. There might be an inflection point. I will be then the first guy to say, raise my hand and say, it's bullshit, or I was wrong. And I think it's a very healthy way as well. Right now, I don't see a reason for that.
Do we have questions from the audience? I assume that there are a lot of questions. Yes, we already see a raising hand there. The microphone will be coming to you from any direction.
First hand, thank you for this really very interesting insights. Yeah, and I do hope that you're right, that Bitcoin will not go to zero. I was thinking hopefully there won't be a war in 2029 and 2030. When there is no energy, how can you get the value out of your Bitcoin account to say simply to buy a bread or meat or something like this? This is what I'm thinking of.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Well, how do I get Bitcoin out of?
Energy.
If there's no energy around.
Yeah, because a network, I'm in IT. I know a network security.
You like then.
And I'm thinking of it's nice to have a decentralized network, but without energy or without having the Wi-Fi that you can take your iPhone and check your wallet. And how can you get the value out of your Bitcoin account to buy bread and so on in cases of really?
How do you bake the bread? How do you bake the bread?
I think in order to do that,
it's a good point,
make a very fair point. I think it's a very great point, actually. It's important. I should have talked about that. the energy you can get out of a Bitcoin is only if we finally get as well to a state of Bitcoin where we don't look at Bitcoin just as a store of value. We will look at as like, as it actually was anticipated in the white paper, as like a peer-to-peer transaction. And by the way, the very first transaction, which was very important, with the famous pizza transaction of like the 10,000 Bitcoin, I think that's absolutely critical. Otherwise, I just say I have Bitcoin and we all sit there and like, oh, it's going to go up and we are rich on paper. No, that's meaningless. I agree. And and therefore I'm not this whole Michael Saylor thing and Wallstreet thing at all. I think hopefully until 2029, the Bitcoin community will start building product, will start and that's, I think, an interesting thing here. I didn't mention that, and I have to be careful because I'm here in Switzerland. So even I have a Swiss name, I grew up next to Switzerland, Lake of Constance. But my last boss, I left Deutsche Bank and then I was hired by Cantor Fitzgerald. My last boss is Howard Lutnick. He's the guy who put like the 39% on you guys. But I could have told, you should have asked me, don't deal with him that way. And I had a discussion with Howard in 2018 in his office 19. He's a Bitcoin guy. And we actually talked back then already, and he's in like financial markets, like exchanges, and we try to come up with the ideas how to quote futures, for example, instead of like in dollar, quote it in Bitcoin. I think it's important as well that somehow we start thinking in our life about Bitcoin and act accordingly, and to say let's do real transaction. Then you can do that, I think. Otherwise, yes, I think and Bitcoin community has to do a better job, create this type of like product, and not just to say what's Michael Saylor, like a cult guy, is saying tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Another question?
Thank you so much, a great talk. Since my generation has a housing crisis and I don't want to exchange Bitcoin with fiat money, so what you see or how you see it that you get a mortgage out of your Bitcoin to buy something like a house. I think we're a little bit on that already in Switzerland. I saw that there are some products now coming. I'm very interested in that and I would love to see or to hear your view about that.
Now you have in Switzerland, what's the name of the firm? I've forgotten. Signum, right? Signum. It's a great firm, I think, and Firefish. You have different firms out there. I think it's a great idea already for people to say, as you have Bitcoin, I don't want to exchange Bitcoin. But then I'm banker too much, and I'm too much of a mark-to-market guy. Markets have the tendency to smell weakness. So if you really take out a loan, and that's like again not financial advice, I would not go overboard with this whole thing. Like non-recourse, long dated, no mark-to-market, not like a mortgage where you get 60-70% loan to value, go like to 20, 15, 20, because let's face it, Bitcoin was at $126,000 and dropped down to half since then. Imagine you had like what people have, 50%, some of them. That's going to be nerve-wracking. So I would say that's a good way to do it, but low leverage, because Bitcoin is still a quite volatile asset, and yes, there's fiat money, but the last thing I need in my life is like getting stressed from fiat. When I'm out of fiat. But I think low leverage, I think sounds like a reasonable strategy. 15, 20% not. I personally wouldn't go beyond that. And I like Bitcoin.
Thank you so much.
Are you happy with the answer? No problem.
Thank you, Reto. Thank you, Pius, for these insights. So these days, a lot of people are talking about debasements, about the fact that gold is rising against the dollar, And my question is about how do you see a Bitcoin standard behind the scene, behind the US dollar, behind the euro? Because now everyone is talking about the gold standard that has been removed. So how do you see in the future a Bitcoin standard?
You mean Bitcoin standard in terms of like a reserve? as a reserve for the currency.
Yeah, as a reserve for currency. Yeah.
That's none of these things where I have strong opinions, as I tend to have on a lot of things, even if I have no idea. But on that one, I would say again, Bitcoin is much larger than any country, any president, and any Michael Saylor out there. So I don't think Bitcoin needs actually reserve standards, which again is a bit of a way for us who are in Bitcoin to say, oh no, it's going to go up. But I think again, the original idea was like the decentralized system, peer-to-peer. I can transfer value to you, Désirée. You can transfer value to Alex. And now suddenly you have governments involved. Now you're going to have regulation involved. So suddenly I think the great libertarian idea is getting lost, and actually you get closer to governments and states. So I just do not like big states at all in the first place. And secondly, I don't really want to have actually something which I consider as very precious, Bitcoin, in the hands of states. So I'm not a big fan of the idea. Thank you. So, and by the way, the best thing is for states that they run, ultimately the deficit going to be so high and the debt going to be so high, they're going to, they have to freaking restructure the whole thing and fire the politicians and get rid of bureaucracy and get rid of complexity and just have a simple life again for all of us. That's what I don't need, is even a strong government which can even overreach even more than they do already.
We already do have a next question.
Yeah. Dr. Sprenger, thank you so much for today's conversation, especially around explaining what happened in 2000, 2007 and 2008. Those of us who were around really relived that as a scar. At that time, you and Michael Burry were, I would say, on the same side because you had the same thoughts, and now Michael Burry is kind of different. Leaving aside the philosophical aspect of whether Bitcoin is good or will have good value or not, what would be your mathematical definition or description of why it would actually achieve that number? I know you asked that question, but how would, as a mathematician, since you have always been believing in quants, would you define that it would actually have a value? Not the philosophical definition, but the mathematical one.
So to derive a value of Bitcoin, you mean?
Yes, at $10 million, as you said. Or even 1 million for that matter.
Well, I would say, I would say the following. The value comes from the network. It's as simple as that. I think that's what I just said. It comes from the network. The value of the internet comes from the fact that you have a decentralized network with a lot of independent participants. And now, of course, it comes then to human actions. And I'm a big... That has nothing to do with math. Actually, that's the whole thing. I'm not a believer in like convoluting mathematics and science with economics. I think it's got nothing to do with each other. So I'm a big believer in the Austrian School of Economics. It's like whatever price you and I are humans being, and wherever we are willing to transact, that's the price we determine. And if we believe Bitcoin has a decentralized network, offers all this opportunity. Right now, the market says it's at $67,000. So I don't really apply, you cannot apply to Bitcoin any, and I don't believe there's an intrinsic value when you apply a discounted cash flow. None of this exists. No, I don't think. So I wouldn't apply mathematical methods now to derive for the future based on network. I can derive a price from what I've seen in the past, but on its own, I wouldn't be able to derive one.
Thank you.
There are some more questions from the audience.
Hi. Magnus Jones from Nordic Blockchain Association here. You refer to yourself as a Bitcoin maximalist, if I understood you correctly. And I was curious towards something that you sort of answered, but still. The basis of Bitcoin is to be a counterparty towards, call it, governments, banks, and the institutional side. However, what we see now, like Désirée said, in order to have a growth, maybe a little ironically, we need the institutions to come in there. I was curious from your point of view, Are you for or against, like for example here in Switzerland, it's been up to consideration, should it be a vote towards whether or not the Swiss central bank should have, a Bitcoin reserve? Like in Norway, we're discussing with the Bitcoin Policy Institute, should the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund go and acquire Bitcoin? I see it personally as quite contradictory towards it's totally opposite towards the mantra of Bitcoin to say we want governments to own this thing, compared to you as a capitalist to say, hey, I actually need these institutions in order to grow my own welfare. So if there was a vote now and you were allowed to vote, would you vote for or against that the governments were to have Bitcoin as a national store of value in one way or another of the bank, central bank, or a sovereign wealth fund?
Well, now I say something which is political incorrect, but I say it anyway. I tend to vote against governments to start with. So that's my first instinct. But now we have governments. We have it what it is. So I would vote against having governments Bitcoin. I don't think they have a role there. I think as Bitcoin, like one thing as well I want to say, Bitcoin Maxi, we talked about that. I'm not like the Maxi, like, it's like my whole life depends on Bitcoin. Like, not really. That's like, I own stocks and I love stocks and I do a lot of other things, private investments. But yes, Bitcoin is a big drive of that. But I believe if we are, I think that's it. The last, Bitcoin goes to different phases. And if Bitcoiners become more confident what they are sitting on, and not trying to get the confirmation from Wall Street or from Donald Trump. It's like crazy. Donald Trump gives a damn about Bitcoin. He can give less. He's like, whatever interests him. And I'm not like making a political statement. That's just the way he is. So is Howard Lutnick, who I happen to know very well. He gives a shit at the end of the day. Whenever he makes some money, he's in it. And I respect that. I respect that as a capitalist, very much so. But do I think that government should have a role? Because the last thing I want to actually see, let's assume Bitcoin is doing what I think it will do. It will actually give even more power to governments. I don't like the idea very much. I want the power to ask people.
But do you think you need to update your time estimates in terms of the price of 10 and 20 years in some matter then? If we are saying no governments are going into this one.
No, not at all. Like, think of it. Right now, a couple of years ago, if you had said, oh, who has more than 100 billion? Like with a few people. Now you have like Elon Musk getting to the 1 trillion mark. You have like just individuals now being in the, if just the billionaires allocate a few, you don't even need that much, as I said. You have only 21 million Bitcoins. You have only, most of them are often hodled. There's not that much out there. And now let's assume the billionaires said, I put only 2-3% of my wealth in that. It really takes care of everything. So I think for me it's important to move it away from market too much from like the Wall Street hedging guys, hedge funds overall, or to actually all this like governments. I think one idea which Michael Saylor, I liked what he did, is like getting the rich guys involved as well. And if they are long, they have plenty of money. I think that's enough to get us to these prices.
Thank you. I agree with that.
Maybe
and I would also use then rather 17, 18 million instead of 21, unless Quantum comes in and manage to open up the rest. So that's also part of the math.
Maybe just one short question from my side that could fill up a whole panel, but maybe could be interesting also. Like the next step in AI will be autonomous AI. What do you think, which currency will they prefer?
Oh, you mean like the AI agents?
Like completely autonomous
AI?
Yeah,
so
they need something very resilient. They need something that is independent.
Well, there's of course right now this massive development. I think some of guys must have seen it, what Peter Steigenberger did in Austria, in Vienna, where he built this open claw, which is like a fascinating thing. He hates he hates crypto and he doesn't like Bitcoin, bizarrely. So clearly he's a bit
Let's see what his AI is thinking about that. It's autonomous.
So and I've seen, I don't know whether you watched the social media, which is controlled only by AI. It's quite fun. I think it's called Mold, something like that, a Mold. And I think when you've seen that humans can only observe, they're already exchanging keys, they have kids, they have a church, they do everything there. It's beautiful. So what type of thing can I use? I think when it comes to speed, now Bitcoin clearly on-chain is not that fast, but when it comes to speed, when it comes to you have no onboarding, no KYC, nothing of that. I think clearly, I would say Bitcoin, but I think any form of crypto, I wouldn't just say Bitcoin, will be very interesting way of means of exchange between this AI chains.
Reto, is the time? Do we have some more?
Just 2-3 questions. Then
wonderful. The last 2 or 3 questions, yeah.
Sure.
Alex, please.
Thank you. There's a lot of talk about Bitcoin, but the technical roadmap for Bitcoin is really slowed down. In fact, pretty much dead. Ethereum, a lot faster, a lot more scaling. What's your view on this? Do you think Ethereum will simply absorb Bitcoin at one point? There'll be another thing on the
it's a very good point. As we speak, I'm just in the middle of finishing a book called The Block Size War, which talks about what happened 10 years ago. And I think that really just shows, I think there's weakness as well in Bitcoin. I think the whole developer, maintainer, that's a bit for my liking, and I'm not a developer by any means, it looks very concentrated on that front. It's too opinionated by a few guys, and hardly anybody understands what the hell are they talking about. Has huge impact, absolutely. So I think what we need is maybe not just on the core side to improve and be better. I think even, and that's what I was referring to on the peer-to-peer, to build products around this whole thing. That's missing completely. When I go to, and I'm going once in a while to these Bitcoin events, I see mainly the key speaker is always Michael Saylor. And then you see all the guys, let's have Bitcoin going to trillions, which is, by the way, crazy as well. It's not going to happen. But I think what's missing is indeed building cool products. I think that's and which really serve people. And maybe what you just said, there's AI agents can be a very good start as well. I would assume as well one of the critical questions, and that has an impact on the Bitcoin price lately, is this whole quantum risk people are talking about. And I think Wasim, I talked to him thankfully just before this talk. Still, we have some time, but it's irritates people, and you don't even have to crack the encryption of Bitcoin, but just the perception can create reality. And that can be much earlier than you think it can. So I think that's, again, here it feels like very hostile in a community. It's not very healthy. So from the outside, I'm not part of the development. Like, I'm 58 years old. What the hell do I know about that? So I think that is much more improvement, much more, I think, working together. On the other hand, that's where the capitalist comes through. That's one thing I understand at the age of 58. There's so much stake involved even by these people. They don't want to lose their freaking Bitcoins. That it goes to zero. And that's always the best incentive if you fear you can lose everything if you screw it up.
Exactly. We started the discussion on quantum and encryption, and that's where I wanted to go again. And as you mentioned now and before, that when the perception is there that it could break, that quantum could break the encryption, and the need that it needs to be further developed. Maybe you have some more thoughts on that, but you certainly did.
Yeah, sure. For example, we have to be willing to take, we have the tendency always want to build good products which look very nice, very ethical and everything. I never build ethical and nice products, as I pointed out. It's like, just want to make money. So, yeah, and I think, let's face it, NVIDIA started with gambling. That was the source in 1993. How can we create a chips that people can do gambling? Now, under ethical standards, Germany would have this loaded. No wonder this company would have never happened in Germany. No, out of that, by pure accident, and you end up, so, whoa, this is the most valuable company now with almost like, it's like 5 trillion today. Where do I get to? In order, for example, and I'm just coming up now with one idea. Why not creating like betting platforms? Why not creating exchanges like Polymarket quoted in Bitcoin? Yes, suddenly it's, huh? Yeah, very little. Like one is called Bitpanda. That's a broker. No. Is there? It's a decentralized blockchain solution created by Weitere. I'll share it with you. Oh, that's great. So you see, I didn't know that. But these type of things, let's get involved in gambling. Why? Why do I like actually gambling so much? Because I did that most of my life. But I think what it does is like you're a Bitcoiner. You don't want to lose your Bitcoin. Now you go into a betting site and say, well, I can bet better than the other guy. So actually, if I'm lucky, I can have even more Bitcoin. And suddenly that's the way, and from that things evolve. I just feel it comes to your question. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. I think all the smart contracts, all the interesting stuff is done with other tokens. Even when you go to Polymarket, it's on Polygon network. No, yeah, it's a stable coin, but the underlying technology is the Polygon, I think, network running it. Just like I placed my last bet, I think, yesterday evening. So now you do see what I do in the evening. So I think that's something where we can have a bit of like cool product, gambling product, and not try to pursue to convince other people. Say, oh, Bitcoin is this wonderful, nice thing. It's like no, it has to use it, do something, but go a bit wild. I think that's missing. It sounds crazy now from an older guy like me to say that, but I think that's somehow missing in the Bitcoin community. But by the way, what really irritates me most in the Bitcoin community, to be on the negative side, I was invited, I'm not saying which one, to a conference where it was about institutionalization of Bitcoin, and the key speakers were former compliance officers. That really freaked me out.
But you didn't answer the question about the encryption. And the risk that quantum is breaking the encryption.
I think that the answer is here that has to be solved by the core team, and it has to come to a conclusion. And I think, and again, I'm too far away from that. I will say, quantum resistance Bitcoin will lead to a hard fork, very likely. I think that will be a hard debate. I think that's not something where. It's not that easy. I think banks are bizarrely in a better positions because they have like more local. For Bitcoin, I think that's going to be a tough discussion. But as I said earlier on, I think they're going to find a solution. But if Wasim is right, and you think it was like 32, 33, you said, I think in the next 3-4 years something has to happen. Otherwise, you're really running a real risk here. So I think the core group, and you've seen our proposals and you see stuff, but
my second question is, you spoke about the log, the development, but I haven't heard you mentioning the 4-year cycle.
Because maybe that's fake. And I will say that one in a moment, because when you have power law, when you have distributed networks, when you have biological cells, or we humans growing or animals growing, that usually happens in a multiplicative way, not additive. So the minute where you have multiplication, you expect actually a log distribution, a log type of like pattern. So therefore, for bubbles, you would actually expect as well a log time distributed bubble. Where do I get to? When we come with the 4-year cycles, it looks linear. But the 4-year cycles do not take one thing else. There's little liquidity, but don't see one time, which was 2011. Went up a lot. Tomorrow I show this slide. When you do that, there's wonderful work done by Stephen. He's a member of the Scientific Bitcoin group as well, institute as well. Stephen Paragot, and he really did great analysis using wavelets and Fourier studies, Fourier transformation, and he came actually with the following interesting thesis. He thinks based on that, we actually gonna see the next bubble. That's his thesis, and we'll see that by summer 2027, and I can share it afterwards. So it's got an interesting paper on that one, but he takes into account actually the 2011 bubble and the 2021, where you have seen 2 spikes. That sort of like he explains in a sort of like harmonic type of like wave function. It's a bit out there. Again, it's a hypothesis, but he claims, and I'm more on his side, it wouldn't even fit to the power law if it were linear. But that's a scientific question.